That being said, let's get to the tiers. The very first tier here, I called it just the not having this combo because I was given a list of guys. And these guys, I just listed 64 guys. These guys, I mean, just objectively, they're not Hall of Famers. It is Cooper Kupp, who had, second most receiving yards in a single season all time. He's not a Hall of Famer. Had just a handful of 1,000-yard seasons. Is obviously towards the end of his rope now. I don't think we're going to get too much more out of him. Not a Hall of Famer. Keenan Allen, not a Hall of Famer. Joey Bosa, not a Hall of Famer. If he would have stayed healthy his entire career, we could be having a different conversation. Unfortunately, things went awry for him. Stephon Diggs, not a Hall of Famer. Joe Flacco, not a Hall of Famer. 0 Pro Bowls. Russell Wilson, not a Hall of Famer. I know he has 10 Pro Bowls. He has a Super Bowl ring. To me, he doesn't fit that bill of what we were talking about of
top 3 to 5.
Yes. Did you ever look like that guy?
No, look, Russell was 6, 7, 8 for a decade, and then faded into the 10 to 15 here as of recent memory. He came on so hot that rookie year. I mean, to win the Super Bowl in Seattle, to be part of that defense, obviously a lot of eyeballs were in Seattle. You talk about Pro Bowls for Joe Flacco. It's like I compare it to big wave surfing, this whole NFL fame, NFL legend status. First off, you got to pick the right beach. You got to get drafted in the right spot. You got to be healthy enough to paddle out. You got to have your timing right to wait for the right wave. And, maybe your team wins and you happen to be healthy and you play well. That's like the perfect win. And if you can do that for a few years, you end up on a really short list of players that are like, oh, that guy's a Hall of Famer. But if you're not, and you don't have Super Bowls and you don't have the accolades, you better have been, as you put it, so dominant that you're undeniable.
Wilson, to me, he wasn't. And comparatively, I think he has a much better case than Flacco. But when you compare him to the era that he was in, he kind of made those Pro Bowls because he had the best defense in the NFL. He made those Pro Bowls. Yeah, he had good stats, but he had good stats because they were running the ball a lot, because they didn't have to pass the ball a lot, because
they won 10 years. They won 10 games a year for a decade,
because they could win games, 14-10. That was the Legion of Boom. It was the best defense of the 2010s, and he was connected to it. And that's why they won a bunch of games. But it's hard for me to go to bat for the guy like Russell Wilson, given that. And then his longevity, which is kind of, he's in his late 30s, and he's dropped off a cliff. He did not have an impressive length of his career compared. He's not gonna there's no argument that's going to revolve around how long he played, the volume stats that he put up that's going to get him in the Hall of Fame either, in my opinion. The other two guys here, Harrison Smith, Joel Bitonio. We don't even have to talk about that for too long. It's just like Harrison Smith was maybe a couple years in there, truly, a top 5 guy in his position. Yes, he's played for forever, but to me, not a Hall of Famer.
All right. Immediate Ring of Honor.
Yes, exactly.
Immediate, team of the 2010s or whatever, all decade team. But this is a big gap to bridge for Hall of Fame for a lot of these guys.
Yes, and if it's me, Notre Dame homer saying that this other domer does not belong, it's like, hey, he probably doesn't. All right, the next tier. This one, here's where it gets more interesting. These are guys who, if their career ended today, they're not Hall of Famers. If kind of their career arc continued on its path, I still don't quite think they're Hall of Famers. But I think they're all good enough and capable enough that if they have health go their way, if they play for, a little bit longer than you might expect in terms of the usefulness, that these guys we could be talking about by the end of their careers as Hall of Famers. The first one, A.J. Brown. This might be a little disrespectful to A.J. Brown and his talents, because, again, I think he fits that bill of a guy who's at times been a top 5 wide receiver in his career. But I think he's in the wrong era, just because when you look at the rest of the receivers around the NFL, and we'll get to these guys, but he's behind Justin Jefferson right now in his career arc. He's behind Jamar Chase right now in his career arc. He's behind CeeDee Lamb. He is on the out. From an era, it's hard to put in that many guys at one position. We're just going to have to kind of tilt our expectations from, let's say, 2008 on, guys whose career started then at the wide receiver position, at the quarterback position, just because the numbers are so different.
It's a different game, dude.
It's a different game. So A.J. Brown, 7,026 yards through 6 years. That's not quite 1,200 yards a year average, a little over 1,100 yards a year. That's good. But all the other guys I mentioned are up in the 1,300 yard a year range. There are numerous guys who have started their career doing just that. So I think he's just a little bit on the outside looking in. But again, like, he is talented enough. The problem is he's not in a volume passing offense. He is not going to be anytime soon, it looks like, there in Philadelphia. So that's the one thing that's not necessarily in his favor.
AJ
Next
Brown,
guy.
dude. If he, I understand. Like, if he keeps it up though, like if they win another one in Philly, and there's certain teams where if you win a Super Bowl in that town, like, you get vaulted, you get launched, like you cut the line. It's the fast pass at Disney.
Yes, if you're on, and we'll get to that conversation when we talk about some guys on the Chiefs and this run that they've had.
Yeah, we will.
When you have 3 Super Bowls, 4 Super Bowls, like one of the guys we're going to talk about, it gives you a little deference in the eyes of the committee. You get put closer to the front line, even if necessarily your down-to-down play wasn't, just because you're part of a team that's historic like that. Max Crosby's the next one here. Almost 10 sacks per season for his first 6 seasons, 59.5 through 6 years. He's about to turn 28, so you think he's got about 4 to 6 more years of doing just that. 2 second-team All-Pros, 4 Pro Bowls. Like I said, I don't think that's quite Hall of Fame pace as of right now, but I think he can get there.
I mean, numbers don't lie. And when you are the cornerstone of a franchise, I weigh that into consideration as well. He's a real leader. He's not just that guy that's in the shadows waiting to go make plays and doesn't say anything. He's a leader. He's a Raider. So what do you say, 69 sacks in 5 years?
59.5.
59.5 sacks in 6 years. Dude, I mean, the guy's going to end up with Cam Jordan numbers by the end of it. And that's a guy we'll talk about soon. But it's wild how every Sunday this guy dominates. Offensive tackles fear him. Offensive coordinators have to scheme around him. And yet we're still like, he could go on a run for the Hall of Fame. Like, that's how great the top is. And that's why it's so hard to have these conversations and have a distinction between the guys that are great and Hall of Famers.
All right, next one, Roquan Smith, Baltimore Ravens.
This is hard, dude.
This is going to be hard because from this generation, I think we had last generation, we'll get to those guys, but Bobby Wagner, Luke Kuechly, Levante David was kind of the old guard of the top end linebacker. Then we've transitioned to this new age where you have a guy in Fred Warner who's going to be in the next category, which is the on pace for the Hall of Fame if they continue the play they're on. And you have Roquan Smith, who I think is like the next up of this generation of linebackers. 3 first-team All-Pros, 2 second-team All-Pros. He's 28 years old. Like I said, I think he's of the sort of mold or of the talent level that it's going to take him getting a handful more, being part of a championship defense, things of that nature. He's going to need more on his resume than just kind of where he's at right now. But he's still young, and obviously he's going to be on a team in the Baltimore Ravens for probably the next 5 to 10 years where they're always going to be in the mix. So you're going to talk about Roquan Smith. You're going to hear about Roquan Smith. So it would not surprise me if he ends up in that mold.
Stud. That's all I'll say.
All right, Saquon Barkley's next. Because as much as, he is the flavor du jour, his first 6 seasons, he went over 1,000 yards in half of them. He had a injury-marred start of his career. He had a poor team-marred start of his career.
This is the surfing analogy. You could be the best surfer in the world. You show up on the wrong beach, you're screwed, buddy. You're screwed. And
so it's hard for me to say he's on pace. Now, he's in an amazing situation. And of all the people on this list, I think he's the one I would bet on this tier, He's the one I would bet on to make the Hall of Fame the most, because he's in a spot where he could go the next 3 seasons, 1,600 plus yards in each of them. And I wouldn't bat an eye, given how good that offensive line is, just given how favorable the run game is going to be with Jalen Hurts as your quarterback. But I just think as of right now, like I said, how I tiered this up, if his career kind of just, he's 28 years old, useful life for running back, how it's been of late, 2 to 3 more seasons, and he has, only 1,000 or 2,000 yard seasons over that, which was, again, the pace he was on over the start of his career. But I think it's going to be a little different than that, I'll just say.
Got to have a little bit of luck. Got to have a little bit of luck to get in these things, man. Because, we're going to talk about a few of these guys, so I don't want to give anything away. But, I mean, look throughout the course of history at some of the players that have not made the Hall of Fame, and then compare the guys that were at comparable positions in a comparable era. And a lot of those guys were just on better teams or they had better situations. It's just unfortunate. There are so many forgotten greats in the National Football League. It's a shame. It makes me sad, dude. I mean, we're talking about something that's so happy. It's like this is the top of the top, but I just get sad thinking about a guy who got rolled up or a guy who got this or that, or Dwight Stevenson was a center and was like the best center ever. And I got to find out. I got to find out exactly that. Well, the story was essentially like an old college teammate cut block him on a turnover or something like that. And Dad always talks about Dwight Stevenson. He's like, Kyle, I wish you could have seen this guy play. And it just makes me tear up when I think about all the greats that we never got to see play. Or Eric Williams, the offensive tackle for the Dallas Cowboys. That was, if you ask any of the guys that watched him play, he was the nastiest, meanest, most athletic dude. He was like Trent Williams out there. But, we don't get a guy like that in Canton.
Yeah. Dwight Stevenson, actually, PFF named their best player each year. They don't give him an MVP. They didn't get the Dwight Stevenson award.
That's fantastic.
So, next guy up, Quinn Williams. This one's a little bit of a call. I debated adding him to this or not, but he's only 27. He's still very young, and I think the interesting thing about Quinn Williams is he's a guy who's been on a team where they've not had leads. If you're a defensive lineman, your brother can attest to this. It's a lot easier to put up stats, to put up numbers when you are pinning your ears back and rushing the passer. And he just has never gotten a chance to do that at any point in his career with the New York Jets. Still been a one-time first-team All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler. I think he's absurdly talented and just a guy that could go on a run. I'm not calling him. I think he's probably least likely of anyone on this, but could go on a run. Chris Lindstrom's another 3-time second-team All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler at the right guard for the Atlanta Falcons, only 28 years old. If he plays a decade after this, we could be talking about Chris Lindstrom as a future Hall of Famer. Rashawn Slater, the last one along the offensive line here, only because 4 years into his career, he basically had 2 years washed out with an ACL tear that came back. ACL tear year 2, came back, I believe, the next year and just wasn't the same. Or was it tricep?
I think he had a tricep. I don't know. We talk about so many of these injuries. I forget. Rashawn Slater. And by the way, Dwight Stevenson, Hall of Famer, but not one of these names that's etched into your mind as the greats. When I think about these greats at the center position or offensive line, I think of guys like Jackie Slater, Bruce Matthews. They had that longevity. Some of these guys don't get to experience that.
Okay, we both got it wrong. It was a biceps tear. That's on me.
Okay.
But that basically came back and wasn't the same.
50% here.
Okay. And then was an All-Pro, second-team All-Pro this past year. So, he's the type of guy that if he just maintains this, I could see him doing it. And the last one, this one may be controversial, but Jalen Hurts. Because this was to the early point. If he wins 3 Super Bowls, which this Eagles team, I don't think anyone would be too surprised if they did. It's still loaded.
He's got aura. He's got aura. It's what the kids like. The Hall of Fame voters are going to get younger and younger. Look for guys with aura to get some of these votes.
So Jalen Hurts very well could.